All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. I'll run the slides. I think it ran on the wrong screen for a minute, so excuse me. But Amy Tatum, welcome.
Thanks, Alex. Nice to chat with you again. It seems like we just did this a couple days ago. So are you going to share our slides for us, or did you need me to do that?
There, you should be seeing the slides.
Yes. So welcome, everybody. This is our university maintenance challenges during a pandemic discussion. And we've got a couple of great subject matter experts in that field with us today. So we're going to run this as kind of a panel discussion. I've got a few questions to ask this team, but they've got so much great information just amongst themselves that I'm pretty sure once I pull the start cord, they will be off and running with a lot of good information and dialogue. There's a chat window on the Zoom meeting, so if you've got some specific questions that you'd like to ask, please put those in the chat, and I'll be monitoring that as we go along and try to get those out to our panel as well. So let's go ahead and get started, and we'll kick off with some introductions of who we've got with us today. So I'm Amy Tatum. I'm a Solutions Director, Vice President and Technical Director with Starboard Consulting. Starboard's a Maximo implementer and business partner with IBM. I've been working with Maximo for a little over 20 years now. Starboard does integrations, upgrades, pretty much anything that you can imagine related to Maximo. So with us today then, if we want to go to the next slide, you can skip me, but so with us today we have Ian Salada. Did I get that right, Ian?
It's close enough.
Okay.
Yes.
So Ian is with Penn State University, and he is the Director of Work Control. Ian's been a Maximo user for about 7 years now, is also a professional engineer, and is responsible for the maintenance, work planning, and scheduling there at PSU. So welcome, Ian. We appreciate you being with us today. Also with us then is Michael Gunz with the University of Delaware. Mike is the Associate Director of Maintenance Strategy and Planning, also a Maximo user for about 8 years, and quite a good list of credentials there on Mike's name, including the Certified Reliability Leader and an Educational Facilities Professional. So those are two that we don't see very often as well. And he's responsible for the strategies, development, and implementation of facilities, real estate, and auxiliary services, excuse me. So moving on, then we have Shawn Harding from the University of Kansas. And Shawn, I noticed on your intro that you actually went to Kansas State. So I don't know if that was a little bit of a hard switch for you.
Yeah, you weren't supposed to put that on the slide, but.
So Shawn's with us as well. And Shawn is the, I don't know, are the slides following for you guys okay, or is it just my view? Having a little trouble with it, but Shawn is the Director of Facilities and has been using Maximo also for about 8 years in increasingly responsible leadership roles with the University of Kansas for the past 10. So Shawn, thanks for joining us today. And last but no means least, we have Tim Pratt from Bates College up in Maine. And Tim's been using Maximo for about 3 years. He's the Work Control and IT Systems Manager there at Bates College, and is responsible for the Work Control Center and Administrative and Customer Service Hub for Facility Services. So thanks, gentlemen. We really appreciate you all being with us today. And again, this is just a roundtable conversation. So I've got a couple questions to get the conversation started. And then from there, we'll just kind of see how things unfold and where it goes. Sound like a plan?
Yeah.
All right. So Ian, we'll start with you. Take us back about a year already. I can't believe it, since the pandemic started to unfold. At PSU, did the university have any plans to handle an event like this? I mean, from my perspective, these are unprecedented times. So what immediate steps did you all take to ensure everyone's safety?
So
when I think back to, like you said, about a year ago, two events stand out to me with respect to the university operations. And the first was that, you know, of course, the pandemic had been making news nationally, but the university was on spring break, and an announcement came out that following spring break, the university was going to pivot to remote learning only. And then within about a week, the governor of Pennsylvania issued executive orders that limited business activities and work activities. So within that very short period, you know, the week before spring break, we had been in normal operation. Students were all on campus. And then suddenly, almost everybody, you know, all the students were, not only were all the students not returning, but many of the people that worked on site for the university couldn't come in as a result of the governor's orders. And and that was, when you talk about, you know, there was a break point there where, like I said, it was like flipping a switch between normal operation and trying to react to the events that had just unfolded. The university does have a lot of emergency planning in place. We've been doing that for a number of years, and you know, we're required to do annual updates to those plans. But you know, this is a great example of it was an event that is very, very difficult to plan for, and the way it unfolds may not be according to the playbook that you had envisioned. And there were three pieces of that, I think, that made it difficult. Number one, it was, as you mentioned, unprecedented. So, and we're really fortunate about that we didn't have a lot of big events that in our recent history that informed things like this. But the flip side of that is, in any sort of preparation was based on how we might imagine this sort of situation unfold. Second of all was the total scale of the event. You know, a lot of our emergency planning might be around very specific events that affect only the facilities group or, you know, one sector of the university. This affected everywhere all at once for us. So in addition to our own plans, we had to deal with interactions between the plans and responses to plans of other units within the university, as well as outside external entities. And then finally, the timeline of this. It's not a single event that's the emergency and maybe has a very short duration. And then regardless of the intensity of it, that's sort of you might have a long recovery period or resolution period. It's very hard from the very beginning, at least to me, to make a good guess as to when the event was going to end. And so that uncertainty meant that, you know, we weren't reacting and making plans about what we were going to be doing in March of 2021. It was, okay, what's going to happen at the end of the semester? What about next semester? And so there's always this ongoing churn, if you will, of short-term planning. I will say one thing that came out of it is I felt like the facility group overall took a sort of a leadership position in this event because of our experience with emergencies. And so that's a regular part of what the facilities group does is we're often the people that the rest of the university calls with respect to emergencies, whether it's weather events like snow or outages or things like that. So we had planning documents and templates in place for many things. Not, like I said, not necessarily one that was strictly accurate for this particular event, but we also had processes in place that help guide you know, a playbook for when you run into something that's not in the playbook, so to speak. And we have a lot of language and processes around emergency. So we're able to stand up our own emergency operations group relatively quickly. And then we ended up, many members of our team ended up on larger university teams to help guide the overall process and help facilitate that transition. So my guess is that I'm kind of curious about, you know, whether some of the other universities and panelists felt that same thing about the role of facilities group in a situation such as.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Our story is really similar at KU. The timeline, especially. I mean, it was spring break, and then it was basically don't come back, which is probably a similar story to a lot of other folks. And yeah, I wish we could say that we had a playbook for it, but like most folks on this call, you know, I would guess you probably didn't have something for this also. One of the things we did immediately with our staff was, you know, one of the messages that came out from leadership at KU was, you know, if you can be at home, be at home. Yeah. So we immediately worked with staff to, even on the maintenance side, to alter shifts and reporting locations so that we didn't have as many people congregating in the same places, just to help them make sure they were distant. In certain instances, we had people just on administrative leave to just help de-densify as much as possible. Vehicles became an issue, just trying to separate people as much as possible and not have people in vehicles, you know, all together. So that's some of our story.
Seems to be an ongoing thing with most of the universities is vehicle traffic and use of vehicles and such. We run into that problem pretty much every day. So a lot of what we did when we started was try to identify what the problems were. And most of our decision making was based on what the governor decided. So it was important for us to kind of, you know, meet up with what they said and what the CDC said and try to put some kind of a plan together for that. So we based a lot of our plans really and our schedules based on the occupancy levels that they were, you know, denoting at the time. So we put together timelines based on that for us. And like Ian said, you know, everybody was looking to facilities at that time for some kind of a planning or you know, an avenue for them to look towards, because they didn't really have any kind of, you know, way to think about an emergency because they don't deal with it like that. So for us, it was aligning with what the governor stated, what the president wanted to see, and kind of move forward with some kind of a, you know, a date time frame to get us to, you know, each semester or each month at that point.
The facilities and maintenance became first responders for sure in that
We had
scenario.
a similar, yeah, I was going to say we had a similar story here as well. Although we had all of our students on campus, we didn't have a break at the time, so a lot of our initial efforts surrounded once the decision was made to send students home and go to a remote learning model, how to safely get those students off campus and get them home. And then we moved into, well, what do we do now for the rest of the semester, and how do we plan for the eventual return for people? How do we start doing some of the things like identifying occupancy, like Michael said, and working through the facilities group to run some of those things where we had that kind of information most readily available to the college. So it was really get people out, then start planning for the return, and then you know, return to some kind of normalcy and standard operations once we did have all of our students return for the fall semester here. So how we plan for that, how we were able to keep people at safe distances and have safe practices, you know, for our employees, for our students, and for the faculty staff on campus.
guys. So I guess along those lines, with the fall and a lot of return to campus activities, how has this changed just your standard maintenance issues now? Dorm maintenance, classroom issues, it's too hot, the lights don't work, those types of things. What kind of changes have you had to make just in your normal, what I would say, routine responses to the old-fashioned maintenance needs?
For us at KU, we looking through the CDC guidelines and trying to figure out how best to protect folks on campus in our buildings. We realized quickly that, to make sure that we were getting those air exchanges that they were outlining, and to get the filtering up where we needed to, we put a lot of emphasis on preventive maintenance, especially on the HVAC side. Not only just the regular everyday things like filters, which are the kind of no-brainers, but also really going through the air handling equipment and making sure that we're doing everything we can to prevent failures. Because if we're, in the past, you might have been able to get away with an air handler going down for a few hours and nobody really notices it. But if we're, promising those air exchanges in the buildings and in the rooms, you might be in a situation where you're evacuating rooms or evacuating areas of the building if you're not getting those air exchanges and everything that you've been promising. So to help protect folks. So we really amped up our PM efforts, made sure everything was getting done on time, added in Maximo more PM plans, more deep dives into our equipment, both reactively and proactively, just to make sure that we're getting ahead of any issues that might cause failures on campus.
I think, I had encountered some perception from others outside of facilities that, geez, with the students in remote learning and maybe fewer people on campus, there's less maintenance work to do, when in fact, it certainly seemed to be the opposite. Like you said, there, with the absence of people on campus being the ears and eyes for failures and being able to identify failures and turn them in before they grew and created new defects or created larger damage. We ended up doing, additional preventive maintenance, like, inspections and things like that. And also those systems, that's on top of, just because the people aren't there, things still need to work. We need to make sure that the heat is on when appropriate and things like that. And then we have some, there are systems that rely on, normal turnover, like a domestic water system. So safety of potable water systems was something that we didn't really have a lot of preventive maintenance work around that, because you have people in there turning over water systems and things like that. So suddenly we're ramping up all these additional PMs, like you said, and then we have these flurries of reactionary work as we try and get ready for the next phase of operation, like adding the setting up tents. People wanted to be able to gather out in the weather whenever possible. Social distancing markers, plexiglass barriers, signage. So it was very, very busy. It seemed like consistently, just the nature of the work changed somewhat.
How did you handle that with all the increased PM needs and really, I guess, in a lot of ways, decreased staff because of the need to not have as many people on campus and stuff? Did you end up needing to hire more maintenance staff or work a lot of, alternating shifts or split groups up, things like that?
Well, I can speak to that. We had some more space available to us, I suppose, as a lot of the campus shifted to remote work and a lot of the residential facilities sat empty. It really gave us an opportunity in some respects to, especially with the residential buildings, to get into those buildings and do some work that we're not typically able to do. I'm not sure about the rest of my colleagues here, but we host a number of summer programming things. So our residential facilities don't go for long stretches without almost full occupancy.
Yeah, and hardly ever are they not either fully occupied or at least partially occupied. And we kind of rely on those downtimes to do most of our PM work. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, we didn't have a lot of our maintenance staff here. They proposed having people stay home for a time frame and try to figure out exactly how the pandemic was going to go before we actually staffed up. So we had our essential staff because our workforce is union, we basically had our most senior individuals here as the standby essential staff, and tried to more or less create operational checks within the buildings. We did a touring system where we had the maintenance staff go through the buildings and look at the critical ones a little bit more so than some of the others. But we had a combination of our normal 413 buildings. We had about 327 of them that were like the ones that we actually had to look at. Our farm section actually took care of most of their stuff by, their staff being here, and of course being outside, they can do that stuff. So for our normal buildings, we actually had to run through the operational checks and check, just for life safety at a minimum, and see if there were any leaks or possibilities of electrical damage or anything like that. That's kind of how we, ran through the first couple of months.
Okay. So, I guess along those lines, from a supply chain perspective, outfitting folks with PPE, and even I know we're in the middle of a house remodel, and even just getting appliances is taking much longer than normal. So, how has the pandemic affected? It seems like an opportunity to do some maintenance that might have been postponed previously because of the occupancy and people being around. Now you have this great opportunity to catch up on some of these things, but you're lacking maybe some of the maintenance people or the supplies, the parts and materials with which to do them. So how did your supply chain efforts shift and all of this?
We kind of got ahead of the curve at Delaware. We worked with Granger a lot to try and, get some of the PPE that was required. But then we had to start branching out because their supply chain was getting very low and, taking up most of the inventory that they had. So we basically branched out to all of our vendors, plumbing, electrical, everybody, just to see what they had and if they had availability for like cleaning rags and, tubs of sanitizer. And we actually had one of the local breweries, Dogfish Head, had resupplied and revamped their whole operation down in Lower Delaware to make sanitizer. So it was like it was kind of a community effort in a sense for some of the vendors. But for the most part, it was just, where you could get it at the time. We also didn't want to get something that was imported from like other countries because it was taking so long to get.
Sure. It's a nice plug for Dogfish Head. Did Shipyard do anything up your way, Tim?
No, but one thing I would say that we also sort of got a little bit ahead of the curve, and kudos to our administration. They work really well with local hospitals and that sort of thing to even share some supplies, things like hand sanitizing stations and those sorts of things out to some local medical providers that were in need. And then as things further, went along, some of our science groups were able to share some -80 freezers to help store and distribute some of the vaccines. So one of the things that we try to do is really partner in the local community. So it was great to be able to do some of those things with some extra supplies that we may have had on hand.
I think anywhere that we were able to, be proactive and make large purchases at the beginning, and the hand sanitizer was one of those things. And there was also some community involvement, as Michael was saying, that we had an academic unit early on that kind of stepped up and or did step up and actually sewed a large number of cloth masks so that we could, make that gap till the first sets of deliveries came in and help protect some of our essential workers at the very beginning.
Okay.
We've got a similar story to everybody else. It was very difficult to get some of those things in. Kind of like Michael, we branched out quickly from our standard vendors to find it, wherever we could. And we did. Our Maximo team did end up. They put an ordering type system in out there for different departments to order some of the PPE. So it went through the ordering system. We tracked all the inventory in Maximo, went to the ordering system, and we were able to work through the storeroom to get that stuff, the orders delivered out to the shops. So that was a great feature that we propped up pretty quickly.
Cool. There's a question here in the chat with the changes due to emergencies, handling assigned PMs. Did you all, were you paper-based before the pandemic? Did you move to a mobile solution? Did you already have a mobile solution in place and this just further established it as a critical part of the Maximo infrastructure? How did you handle the assignment of work?
Tim, this is probably a good one for you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, as the pandemic was starting, we had undertaken an effort to do a pretty full re-implementation of Maximo, including moving to mobile devices and a mobile app. So it was fortuitous when we eventually, when we eventually were able to complete our project, and we moved from what was 100% paper-based system of printing every work order, and then a shop chief or somebody then bringing stacks of paper down to the workbenches and then distributing them from there. As you can imagine, there's all sorts of touch points and collection areas that were precisely the things that we wanted to be avoiding. So once we were able to stand up our new re-implementation, it sort of partnered the mobile device for the work execution side, and then we implemented some pretty robust workflow elements to be able to do individual assignments, which was a big thing to get all of our supervisors logged into Maximo on a daily basis. Was something pretty new, especially on the scale of our entire department. So we moved from a paper system to 100% electronic work assignments and execution, and that not only helped, I guess, keep people away from each other, but also a lot more efficient, a lot more visibility on every work order that's out there. So it was very, very successful and timely. Maybe even a little behind where we should have been. It would have been great to have all that capability at the start back in March, but it was great to eventually get to that.
Yeah, at UD, we already had a mobile solution in place. We use Easy Max Mobile and iPads with all our mechanics. So as we, to the question, we ended up, some of the PMs that we already had slated and scheduled and planned for the months that we had, we ended up having to possibly push off because we had limited staff. So as we did that, when we got more staff on campus to do things, we started completing those past due work orders on the current ones, just by using the log notes and some other things, so that we could, keep consistent with the PMs themselves, identifying that it was done at a certain date so that, frequencies could be changed if necessary, or, we could go and tried to go towards more of a, possibly a meter-based PM system, because that would help us later on down the road, but it also fixes a couple of problems that we had currently. Having the mobile devices is really, really kind of a key factor, I think, and I'm sure the other three will, agree. It keeps it one-on-one so that there's, no touch points, a little bit less on the, the interaction, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been mobile for about 6 or 8 years at KU, but we had used iPod touches, so like a smaller phone size that kind of fits in your pocket, but we had just upgraded to the iPads, the ruggedized iPads, which was great. And in hindsight, really helped us out a lot because we knew going into changing shift schedules around in different reporting locations and things like that we really needed. We were going to rely a lot on email to make sure that everybody was getting the messages from supervisors and leadership. I mean, all the emails that came out from different leadership groups about what's happening on campus was really important. So in hindsight, that was a great move. But yeah, as far as PMs and, you know, the tickets come through, the service requests, we use service requests, and then those get routed through a work management center that gets assigned by the supervisor out to the individual. But our PMs come in directly. When we set up the PM, we assign who it's going to go to. So when those generate, they come out directly to the technician. There's no passing it from supervisors. But that's kind of how we operate with Maximo, and we use Easy Max as well.
Yeah, having the mobile devices, we didn't, you know, was certainly a boon. We're also using Easy Max Mobile, and although we didn't change how we were assigning things, the mobile device, in one example, having that available helped us make a transition that we've been trying to make for quite a while, which was there's still a lot of reliance on submitting paper requisitions, and the whole trying to keep everyone safe and socially distanced. It was an opportunity to say, everybody needs to really start focusing on electronic requisitions and not, you know, going into the issue desk every time they need something or congregating there. And then secondly, the fact that they, you know, similar to the email comment that Shawn made, having technicians, you know, having them have a tool that allowed them to access Teams and Zoom. That was something that I think when we handed out mobile devices, that certainly wasn't on my radar or something that we had ever imagined. But that became a big part of communication amongst crews and supervisors as well.
And I think it opened up collaboration too, because now, you know, the units are using their iPads for taking pictures so that they can attach it to the Maximo work order, or, you know, doing a FaceTime call with their manager to say, hey, look at this, you know, we need to repair this really quickly. I mean, it's a game changer for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We were able to, you know, continue communications and staff meetings, like all staff meetings for our whole department. We were able to pivot to an entirely, you know, Zoom-based staff meeting and have a really good participation level from our staff. And then a lot of the official sort of college communications were, you know, beyond written statements, were also coming via Zoom meetings. So being able to plug our staff into those communication streams was really important, and a lot of them took advantage of it, which is very good. And I see a question. We're not an Easy Max mobile school. We use a product called Max Apps from a company called IMAX EAM, which can't say enough about the configurability and how flexible it was, and what a good implementation we had with them.
Yeah, and to answer the one question, Easy Max does have an offline mode that works. We use it. A lot of the mechanics are a little opposed to it because they're, you know, maybe a little bit of training. Some of them are, and that's another thing is like we have an aged workforce. So putting an iPad in somebody's hand like that, there tends to be a little trepidation in using it and how they use it. So we've been stressing that if you don't have Wi-Fi access, to use the offline mode. The biggest thing is to sync so that you understand that you have the latest and greatest of the work orders, make sure that you have important information or any of the stuff that you had saved offline actually gets saved to the online mode.
Yeah, and our product also has an offline mode, and it does sort of a behind the scenes sync. So when you reconnect, it does an automatic sync of anything that you've done. Will come back in. We're using, I think, Shawn, you had mentioned iPads. we're using the iPad. We're using iPad minis, which seem to work. They're a good balance between screen size and portability. One of the things we really wanted to make sure we were doing was not burdening the techs with a large device to carry around. So we thought that struck a good balance. But we're all sort of at the whim of what Apple decides to continue as a product line. I know that they discontinued the iPod touches, and there was rumor that they were going to do the same to the iPad minis, but they ended up extending the life and issuing a new version of that.
We're kind of 50-50 on those, but we ended up going with the bigger because of floor plans and things like that, just less pinching and zooming. But,
To follow up on Pam's comment, I think it is incredible how there's been so many opportunities that have been found within the challenge of the pandemic. And there's also a question here in the chat, and along those lines with the aging workforce, and several of you had mobile devices in play before this all started. But a year ago, none of us were on Zoom meetings, and a lot of people didn't even know what Zoom was. So do you feel like some of that has helped with that aging workforce, or with others, to kind of overcome some of the resistance to change and embrace that new technology and see the value of it, whereas maybe they didn't before?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I think I saw, and based on that comment, there was a lot of resistance to the union, and a lot of the workforce thought, "Oh, you're just watching me," because they have an iPad now, and well, you can track me. Well, for all intents and purposes and safety reasons, yeah, we can.
Yeah.
But the idea is to give them something that is usable. Most people have, devices that they use outside of here. So if we give them something that's a little bit more, cohesive in their work practices and how they can, use it for different things, like I said, with the attachments or taking pictures of specific things that you see with equipment going wrong, then, that's better trackable, and it gets into your reporting and some of the other things that help you better manage your work.
Yeah, we definitely saw a positive side to our workforce, just getting in and using them. And because some of the guys were using, when we first started a while ago, some of the guys still had flip phones and stuff. And I had guys asking me, after a while, like, could I put an app on there that I could take out on my fishing boat and it'll track where my good spots are? And I said, yeah, here you go. Here's how you do it. On the flip side, we did, anybody that, I hate to kind of go down this road, but anybody that kind of just refused, we said, well, this is part of your performance now. And we've even started writing in to our position descriptions that, one of the requirements is to be able to, perform digital communications on mobile devices. So that's all kind of baked into our positions now. And it's just the stuff you learn over time.
Yeah.
And to try to smooth the whole situation over, like Shawn said, we gave them access to put apps on that they wanted or that they found that were helpful, or even, personal apps that they could use at home if they needed to. We allow them to take them home, just so that they have that capability if they need to, and it makes it a little easier for them to know that we trust them.
That's nice.
I've got a forward-thinking boss that is always saying that we should just jump in and try stuff, which is was very great leadership attitude when we didn't have any other choice but to start doing things differently back in March. So that was a big help. And like everybody else here, we were upfront with the techs. We talked about the mobile device management that we use in order to push updates out to the devices, and also tried to talk about we don't have the administrative time or capacity to sit around and watch where somebody's going and what they're doing. One person, let alone an entire workforce on any given day. So we all have we have better things to do with the time that we have, and hopefully the devices are a tool to empower them to make more and better efficient use of their time as well. And it has been, for sure.
Sure. So with the devices, I mean, some of the things you guys have mentioned, there's the ability to take photographs and communicate with others on the workforce. A lot of data can be collected out in the field that maybe was getting written down or not recorded at all electronically. So how have you seen both your use of Maximo, but then also are there changes to your reporting that are required maybe through CDC guidelines or regulatory agencies or others, where having those devices also is critical to just being able to get that information in so you can report it back out?
The good use that we have for ours was the time input.
Okay.
So with EasyMax, they have basic time input. More or less, you can do everything that you need to do in native Maximo, but the time input was the critical thing. And we made it mandatory that if you were on campus, that before you left the building, you completed your work order and put your time in directly. And we use that as contact tracing with our medical services division.
Okay.
So if something happened where they had a case in a specific building, we could find out if our technicians were in there and give them a better idea of how and where everybody was. And it keeps safety at a heightened sense too, because now we know, if they were in that building, we have to do something about it to, get them treatment if need be, or contact them directly and say, you need to go over to medical services. It was a good thing for us. And it helped, like I said, with the contact tracing immensely. They used it numerous times for any of the reports that we had where we did, track the hours that the manpower was using. We could give that to them readily, and they used that to help with that.
For us, it was, time for sure, logs, work logs, of course, and pictures. Those three have been game changers.
It helps with our planning and scheduling as well. I mean, we actually push the work orders out to the mechanics' calendars too. So as we schedule, and our scheduling software is Acquire, but as we schedule, they push that out to their Outlook calendars so that it shows up as an appointment. And it just makes it more effective so that we can say, okay, we expect this person to be here, and it helps with our planning and our reactive work to see where our gaps are. So it was pretty cool.
Okay. Ian, what about you? Any changes in how you guys have used Maximo in the last year that are resulting from all of this?
I wouldn't say that we had changed the way we use Maximo. I do think we had some moments where it was very helpful to have Maximo as a tool to help us manage the changes, things, especially in during the periods of uncertainty. When we moved to a remote learning period, a lot of the priorities of someone already mentioned this, that different facilities had a different priority because the use had changed, and so being able to quickly and flex to a different set of location priorities, but not lose the ones that we had previously, that was extremely helpful, and helped the workforce and our planners and estimators adjust to information as quickly as possible. When the university emergency operations pushed out updates on what buildings are being used and in what way, Maximo became a strong vehicle to push that out to all the users as well.
Right.
Yeah, and our data was very important in our justification for specific things, like if we had to bring power back, or if specific buildings needed to be shuttered, or energy conservation. Like we used all of that from Maximo and all that data that we could get out to help report back to our executive leadership exactly what ways we could help by, doing little things, shutting down buildings, lighting, say, and we curbed HVAC usage in shuttered buildings, and that type of stuff. That all had to be tracked in Maximo, all had to be identified. We actually have use of Smart Sheet as well online, so that people have availability to look at it, because we don't have like specific user licenses for everybody. It's just for the facilities group. So using those other tools actually helped incorporate a good communication base to get information out to more people than just those who used the specific reporting stuff.
There's a great question there from Joe, and I my answer is definitely yes, but hopefully you feel the love too. But do you feel like other organizations that probably took asset management and maintenance for granted, and just, those are the people that are unappreciated and always just make things work, but nobody acknowledges that? Do you feel like the facilities management role has a higher respect now, both for emergency and normal operations, after having been through the last year?
Yeah, if they didn't before, they do now.
Yeah.
I'd say definitely some of the details. I never felt like people are always appreciative of the facilities when they work well and meet their needs. So I don't think it was so much that, but some of the nuances, like, well, why do you need to track this? I mean, this piece of information is just paperwork, and shouldn't you just stop the bean counting and
Right.
Fix some more stuff instead of spending your time on this? But at the end of the day, when somebody says, how many -80 freezers do you have, or
Right.
where do you think we could get a hold of this? Being able to say, well, okay, here you go.
Right.
So like, this is when you need it. This is what we do with this.
And I think it was a big turning point for some people to learn how our business operated, because
Sure.
they don't really know. They just put in a ticket. They don't know how the back end works, or how any of the the planning or the scheduling or the reporting or any of the structures that we put in place. They never realized exactly how that went and what was behind it to push it. So as we came up with the plans for how we were going to proceed with different buildings or occupancy, or how we were going to devise, plans for rooms and get students in there so that we could keep the social distancing straightened out, they started realizing that, okay, well, they know where their buildings are. They know what their rooms are. They know the assets that are there. The HVAC works in this room, but not this room,
Right.
There was a lot of logistics that needed to go into place because of what happened, and make sure that people were safe. And then the executive leadership, that was the biggest hurdle, was trying to get them glommed onto what we were doing and get them to understand, like, this is how this works. It's not like it's just throw the switch on and I'm good. It was actually, there were 5 other things that had to happen, whether it was electrical, plumbing, or HVAC, to keep somebody safe when they were in a building.
Yeah, we're heavily invested in asset management now. When we implemented 8 years ago or so, when we re-implemented, we had just a handful of assets. Now we're up to, I think, 25,000 assets. We do roofs aren't roofs anymore; they're roof sections, because you got different warranties that happen on different sections. So we went through an asset at all the sections. I mean, we've got, you name it, it's in there, and we continue to add assets every week, every month, and we're not going back. And we now, Maximo is our single source of truth for all our location data on campus. It's our space management tool. It really handles. We've got, I think, around 20,000 locations. That's every hallway, closet, this office, the office next door, the classroom, and then we've got specs on those different classrooms in there, and we just continue to build on that. Again, day in day, week after week, month after month, and it's the way of the future. And I think that's how all systems. I call Maximo our noun and verb manager. It's got all the nouns that you need. It's got all the people, places, and things in it all across campus. Every person on campus is in there. And then the verbs are the workflows and the things that happen in between everybody. And it really manages everything and puts it all into processes. It's also kind of a Six Sigma machine, Lean Six Sigma machine, that anything you want to measure, track, whatever, stick it in Maximo and run with it.
Yeah.
That's how we use it.
Love that.
I'm a big proponent of that. We our information services manager, John Shawn, and we have discussions about this numerous times about how we can get the data out to help our cause. And, you know, if you put it in Maximo, we'll get it out. If you give us a list, we'll get it out. I mean, there's no telling what we can't do. It's just a matter of what we can get from any of the data that we get.
I want to ask Shawn, have you trademarked the nouns and verbs manager phrase?
I know.
If not, I'm
Go for
just
it.
giving you a heads up. I'm stealing it. Right.
Killing it. No kidding. That's a great one. I love
Yeah,
that.
I second that. I like, Sean, I like what you're saying there. It's, you know, we're sort of at the beginning of that journey that you talked about with, you know, we've just re-implemented now, and, you know, we focused a lot on some of the core work management stuff, and getting work orders routed around the right way, or the way that we thought was going to be right. And so we're excited to now step further into the asset management, you know, journey and go down that road.
And
So
the term I hear every once in a while, I'm sure some sort of buzzword that'll go away later, is a digital twin. You're creating a digital twin for all your, you know, people, places, and things that are on campus, and then of course the verbs that go in between them. And you know, as you go down the road of GIS, which is also part of the future, it's creating the digital twin that goes along with it and shows the point on a map.
yeah.
It's just
trying to get the IoT setup's going to be, for us, it's going to be like a few years down the road, because it's so intrinsic on how you got to do it, get the plans, get the pictures, identify which things are what. And, you know, with our current asset management and how we're trying to get our verification of the buildings and the stuff that's in them and get everything tagged, that's going to be, you know, a pretty integral part in that. So it's good to hear that there's a path going forward, you know. And
I really can't, I stress a lot here at KU, and I think the future problems that we're going to have are these other connected systems that are out there, connected or disconnected, that are also trying to create digital twins. Maybe they just don't even know it yet. And so data governance and standardization is huge. And I keep pounding that drum, and I just can't get enough people to listen. But hopefully you guys are out there doing the same, because that's the future of, you know, integrating systems and getting things to talk to each other. That's going to save a ton of time re-implementing and whatever else that you have to do down the road.
Absolutely. So we're just about to the end of our time. You know, a lot has changed. There's a lot of unknowns still out there. You hear a lot of the new normal, whatever that may be. So as you look back on the year, if you could summarize up, what have you learned during the pandemic, and then what have you implemented during the pandemic that you'll continue post COVID, just because it was the right thing to do regardless of the situation, and it maybe was driven as a pandemic response, but is something that should be there anyway for the long haul?
I think the biggest thing we took away was executive interface. Our executive leadership, they have to have buy-in in what we do. They really didn't have a feel for what and how we operated in our business, and how our business cases needed to be, how a building actually runs. You know, that was a big hurdle for us to pass over, was to get them to understand that. A lot of people don't realize that you can't work on your car when you're running it. I mean, it's a great analogy. If you're driving your car, you're not working on it. You know, it's the same thing with a building, or it's the same thing with any of the assets that we have. You're really not going to be working on it too much when you're running a thing. It's got to be that you plan ahead and, you know, do your changes and do your oil changes, or, you know, your differential, and for pumps and air handler units, you know, filter changes, etc., greasing and lubing of a pump. You know, that stuff has to happen for you to get the longevity out of your asset. And they just didn't grasp that concept, and we've had to push and push and push and push to get them to understand. And it ended up translating to the manpower and doing the work. You know, you have to have the manpower in order to do those things. If you don't, you're going to have, you know, increased failures all of a sudden. And we're going to find out here in about 6 months, it's probably going to go up about 30% than what we normally had, if, you know.
Wow. Okay. Tim, what about you?
Well, I think that we're going to be more willing to, not more willing, I don't know if more willing is the right word, but I think we're going to have some more better trust in our staff to be able to adapt. One of a roadblock that I've had, not just in my current job, but in previous roles, is spending time worrying that something might be technologically challenging to a workforce or something. And certainly our staff has proven that they're adaptable and they're flexible and they're able to change practices and the way that they do work very readily. So as we're looking to, as you know, continue to make changes, I think we're gonna maybe stop worrying about that aspect so much and spend some more time planning on how to roll out some better changes faster even. So that and just better communication is something that we're going to take away from this. There's so many avenues, from emails to Zooms to, you know, we stood up a staff intranet Google site that we're able to share a lot of information out on. So I don't see us doing less communication with our staff going forward.
Good. Okay. Shawn?
Yeah, for us, definitely digital communication and information gathering. Anything that makes your staff more individually nimble or informed and therefore effective is just good for overall health of your organizations and the university as a whole. You know, I'm hoping, and I'm in a position to make sure that it stays that way. But preventive maintenance as a priority just needs to stay. So we've shown that through what we've done through the pandemic of making preventive maintenance a priority leads to, you know, lower costs, which we all knew going into it. But you don't, until you really make it a priority and you see it, you can then prove that this is effective. This is how we need to move forward forever. And so I'm hoping that we're using this time to show that, and I know it's worked with, it's resonated with our staff that preventive maintenance works, and so we will continue on with that.
Making the jump from the theory to the practice and execution of it, so that's good.
Practical application for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Ian?
I think we've seen some important silos between groups break down a little bit, and some greater awareness of the interconnectedness. So the idea that we have some technical experts that maybe set strategy and set performance expectations, and how that you know, during the course of this event, they've seen very clearly how those changes and the information that they provide changes the work that happens in the field. And the fact that, you know, a new regulation or an order would come out, and we'd ask a question, and the way that they answered that, you know, they could see what happened between their answer and how that results in the actual, like I said, boots on the ground. So I'm hoping that continues to be, you know, part of what we do going forward. That it's important that we have people that are the technical experts and you know, the long-term planners and things like that, but they need to get that feedback loop very clearly about what actually happens and how those strategies end up getting implemented.
Okay. Well, guys, we are out of time, but thank you again for your participation today. Some great conversation, great ideas. The Maximo community is a fantastic community. There's the FM mug, the utilities mug, the regional mugs, a lot of things like that. So I would just encourage the folks on the call to get involved in your local user groups and connect with guys like these and others that are equally passionate about the Maximo applications and the capabilities that they bring to your organization. So thank you all again for your time. Fantastic discussion, and Starboard will be having our continuing coffee chat series. So please feel free to tune into those over the next couple of months. Thanks everyone. Alex, back over to you.
Thanks, Amy. Thank you all. What a great presentation. I know I both was nodding my head half the time with all of these comments. Yes, good to hear. Always great to hear how we've turned lemons into lemonades with all of these challenges for the future. As Amy mentioned, we'll be sending these dates out after the fact, but I hope you'll join us for some of our upcoming coffee chats and webinars. And if you have any questions, the contact information will be in the slide deck that we share after the event as well. Thank you for joining us and have a great day, everyone.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.